I was hurting so bad. It's the only explanation I can have for what I did. At 64 years old, I never thought that I would seduce a younger man in the space of a 15-minute car ride. Given the circumstances, I'm even more surprised at my behavior that night. My husband and I had looked forward to the Caribbean cruise our children had gifted us for months. At 81, he still had a clear mind, but his body had been failing him for many years. He was struggling to keep up with a very fast-paced and changing world. We had talked about this cruise giving us needed time away from two grandkids who now lived with us. We could have never expected him to get a serious case of food poisoning the first night of the cruise and get so sick he needed immediate medical attention. To his credit, the captain diverted the ship right away to a hospital in the Cayman Islands. An ambulance met us at the dock, took us to a local hospital where he was treated overnight. We were told that his organs were shutting down and we needed to get him back to America immediately. The next day, I hired a 6-seater airplane to fly us to the Fort Lauderdale airport in South Florida. He was immediately put in an ambulance and taken to a hospital just a few miles away in the city. Over the next 9 days, I watched him have one good day that got our hopes up, only to be followed by 2 bad days that dashed any hopes of his recovery. When he was awake and lucid, we talked about our life together and said our goodbyes, just in case, he said. But we both knew this was the end for him. On the night of the 10th day in the hospital, he slipped into a coma, and I spent the night with a beautiful 27-year-old. Before you judge me, please hear my story and let me explain. I wanted to stay with my husband. I wanted to be there with him when he passed. It was the doctors who encouraged me to get a hotel and get some rest. They told me they didn't think he would make it through the night and to start making arrangements. They assured me he wouldn't know if I was there or not, and I would just be in their way if he coded. Honestly, I was relieved. I was relieved because I was exhausted. I had loved my husband for 37 years. We had our ups and downs during our marriage and had stopped being intimate years ago, but we got through it all and were happy enough. We hadn't seen the world like we dreamed of when we were young, but we had raised a daughter and a son, and were now raising 2 of our grandchildren. The thought of losing him and not having his help was crushing me, but I resolved to remember all the good years and know that if he didn't make it through the night, I was going to get through it and be okay. I found a hotel about 5 miles away and called a rideshare service. I packed all of my stuff into 2 small carry-on bags and went out and waited at the entrance to the hospital. 8 minutes later, Darrell pulled up in a very fancy all-electric car whose name I had never heard of. He got out of the car to help me with my bags, and in front of me stood a tall, slim, well-muscled young man in his late 20s. "Hi, Sarah," he said with a friendly and comforting smile as he helped me get my 2 small bags into the trunk of his car. Before he pulled out of the parking lane, he asked me how I was doing. "Oh, not so well," I said in a voice whose sadness and resignation surprised me. "I'm sorry to hear that." I heard an old soul in his voice that conveyed understanding and concern beyond his years. The deep tone of his voice made me look up at him. I could see his face in the rearview mirror. I could see the square set of his jaw and the kindness in his eyes. He had blonde hair combed straight back from his forehead. My eyes drifted downward. He was slim with wide shoulders. I could see his flat stomach from behind him, and to the side where I was sitting. It was clear to me now that he was much, much younger than me, and he was very, very handsome. Receiving kind words at such a difficult time would have been a welcome thing from any stranger, but coming from a younger man stirred something inside of me, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Over the 15 minutes of our trip, I told him everything that had happened. At times he shook his head in disbelief, other times he just nodded and then said, "I'm so sorry, Sarah." His words were heartfelt and true. I was so thankful that of all the rideshare drivers I could have had that night, the universe had brought me someone like him. As we got near the hotel, he encouraged me to check in quickly, get to my hotel room, have a hot shower, and try to sleep. He pulled up to the hotel, put the car in park, pushed the button to open the back hatch, and started taking my bags up to the front doors. I opened my car door, got out, and watched him go back and forth from the car to the hotel's front doors with each bag. A longing, dormant inside of me for years, awakened and overwhelmed me with feelings I hadn't felt in as long as I could remember. He placed the last bag near the door and walked straight towards me as I stood outside the passenger door of the car. I realized how tall he was, easily over 6 feet. He walked up to me and looked down into my eyes. "Sarah, it was a pleasure to meet you. Please get some rest, and I truly hope you and your husband are able to go home soon." Not even realizing what I did without taking my eyes off of his, I reached out my right hand and took his left hand in mine. "Durrell, I know I've just met you and this may sound crazy, but I don't want to be alone tonight. Would you come up to my room and just sit and talk with me for a little while? I'll pay you for your time." I couldn't believe the words that had come out of my mouth. I had never spoken like that to a strange man ever in my life before that moment, especially a man so much younger than me. But the thought of being alone all night in that hotel room was too much for me. I had felt an immediate connection with him as soon as I sat in his car, and I knew he had felt it as well. All I could think of at that moment was having his arms around me while I wept and grieved. He stood still like a rock in front of me. I looked into his eyes and saw him processing what I had just asked. I saw questions flash across them. I was sure he would smile, say no, and wish me well. I don't know what it was that made him nod his head yes instead. It could have been the tears slowly falling down my cheeks. It could have been the deep sadness in my voice. It could have been the longing in my eyes. He never told me why, he just nodded and said, "Okay, I'll go park the car and meet you at the front desk." He got back in the car and pulled out of the front of the hotel, turned into the parking lot and out of my sight. It occurred to me that he may have just been being nice to a grieving old woman and was now driving away from the hotel. As I was about to reach down and grab the bags and walk through the automatic doors at the front of the hotel, his tall, lean figure came around the corner. So many emotions went through me. It started with surprise, which was immediately replaced with doubt. Did I just invite this man walking toward me to my room? Can I actually do this? As he got closer and I saw again how tall and handsome he was, my doubt was replaced with the deep longing I had first felt during our conversation in the car. It had been so long since a man had made me feel this way. So long since a man had touched me or held me. My husband wasn't that kind of man even when we were younger. Anticipation grew inside me with each step that brought him closer. All my worries and doubts drifted away as soon as he smiled, reached down, picked up my bags and said, "Come on, let's get you checked in." This is really happening, I thought to myself. After a few raised eyebrows by the clerk at the front desk of the hotel, Durrell picked up the bags and we walked to the elevator. He pressed the button for the 10th floor and turned to me. I looked up at him into those stunning gray-green eyes and froze. I had no idea what to do and no idea what he would do. In the most loving gesture I will always remember, he slowly reached out, put his hands on both of my shoulders, and pulled me into him. I buried my head against his chest and held on to him with all the strength I had left. The elevator ride may have only been a minute or two, but it felt like forever as all sense of time slipped away. For the first time in many days, I felt safe enough just to rest and be comforted. When the ding of the elevator doors opening brought me back to my senses, I couldn't even look at him. I just put my head down, looked at the floor, and walked down the hallway corridor to the room. I didn't know what Durrell was thinking, but I knew he was behind me with my bags. I could feel him now. I could feel his presence around me. I got to the hotel room and swiped the key on the electronic lock. The little green light came on and was like a signal to me saying, "Yes, go forward, Sarah, you can do this." I had gotten the executive suite on the top floor of the hotel, just so I could have a little living room area where I could sit. It wasn't anything fancy, but I was glad to have it and especially glad to see a king-size bed. Durrell walked in behind me, put the bags just inside the door, and closed it. When I heard the door close, it was if the whole world outside fell away and now it was just the two of us. All I wanted at that moment was to be in his arms again, lose myself inside of them. I wanted to feel my pain and sorrow fall away. The only thing in my world now, the comfort of my handsome stranger. He walked through the short hallway into the living area of the suite and stood looking around the room. I couldn't control myself any longer and started walking towards him. "Whoa, whoa," he said and put both of his palms up in front of me to stop me. "Go get a shower. I'll be here, right here on the couch when you get out." I looked at him with eyes full of sadness and a slight hint of fear. He repeated himself slowly, Sarah, I'll be right here. I'm not going anywhere. I didn't want to take a shower. I didn't want to do anything except lay down on that king-sized bed and disappear into him. But I realized he was right and walked to the bathroom, shut the door behind me, turned on the shower, and took off my clothes. There was a full-length mirror on the wall just outside of the shower, and as I was about to step into it, I caught a glimpse of myself. I turned towards the mirror and stared. Fear washed over me like a wave. Dark doubts forced their way into my thoughts. What is he doing here? If he sees me like this, he will run out of the room and never look back. As I sat there staring at my old, withered body, seeing the toll the years had taken on it, I resolved to put my clothes back on, go out to the living room, and tell him I had changed my mind. On this night, of all nights, seeing a disappointed look on his young, perfect face when he saw me naked would crush me. Just as I reached down to pick up my clothes off the bathroom floor, a light spray of warm water from the shower landed on my back. Suddenly my body yearned to feel the warm water. My sore, tired muscles cried out for relief. I stepped into the shower, leaned my head on the wall, and let the water run over me, cleansing me from the stress, the fear, the doubt, the worry, and the pain of the last 11 days. I don't remember putting the shampoo in my hands and washing my hair. I don't remember rubbing the body wash all over my body. I don't remember how long I stayed in the shower. I just remember the hot water soothing a weary body, a weary mind, and a weary heart. When the water finally started to run cold, all I could think of was crawling into that king-sized bed next to Durrell. I looked around, and next to the shelves with the towels on them were 2 large white robes. I wrapped my hair in one of the towels, dried myself off with the other one, and put on the soft, white terry cloth robe. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and walked into the living area of the suite. He wasn't there. My heart sank, yet it was hard for me to be surprised after the old woman that I had seen looking back at me in the bathroom mirror. I put my head down and walked slowly toward the bed, only to look up and see a shirtless Durrell sitting underneath the covers with his back against the backboard, looking at me with a gentle smile on his face. I'm here. I'm still here. He patted the place next to him on the bed with his left hand. I walked to the front of the bed, took the towel off my hair, undid the tie of the robe, and let it fall to the floor. I had been emotionally naked with him in the car, telling him my story and bearing my feelings, holding nothing back. Now I stood in front of him, completely laid bare, body and soul, all my imperfections, screaming my insecurities in silence. I waited for a shocked look to come across his face. I waited to feel him pull back in disgust. I waited what seemed like minutes and minutes, but the gentle smile never left his face. Instead, with his left hand, he lightly patted the area next to him on the bed again. Come on, Sarah, come to bed. I walked around the side of the bed, and as I did, he pulled the covers back and revealed all of himself to me. His long torso was rippled with muscles. His long legs stretched to the edge of the bed. I thought to get into the bed, close my eyes, and kiss him as hard and as long as possible. What I ended up doing was fall into the bed as fast as I could and pull the covers over my body as I turned away from him. I was so embarrassed and ashamed of my body. I wanted to curl up in the fetal position and pretend to fall asleep. I waited to see what he would do, unable to move. I felt him turn onto his side and pull himself towards me. He put his left arm under my neck and his right arm came over me, his hand coming to rest flat against my stomach. He took his right leg and gently extended my legs out straight. Then he pulled his body against mine in a perfect spooning contour. I started to cry. Well, that's not true. I didn't just cry, I wept. All of the pain, all of the fear, all of the worry, all of the doubt, all of it poured out of me like a swollen waterfall after a big storm. At first, the only sound I could make were the short moans of weeping, but soon enough it was all pouring out of me in loud cries of anguish and sorrow. Durrell made no sound. Nothing. No. Shh. No. It's all right. He just quietly held me and let me cry. It was as if he purposely created a safe place for me in his arms that allowed everything bottled up inside of me to come out. In the kindest, most patient way, he allowed me to grieve. I cried and cried, stopping many times only to start again. Each time I would grab Durrell's arm and pull it tight around me. This went on for what seemed like hours. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to stop crying until he squeezed me so tight it broke the power of my sorrow. His strong hug interrupted my weeping and replaced it with an intense wave of desire moving through me like a tsunami. He started rocking our bodies back and forth in a slow and rhythmic motion. I synced my body with his, moving in time with it. I realized, for the first time in as long as I could remember, my body was on fire with passion. His hands began exploring my body. As they roamed to certain parts of me, I let out a low moan as a pulse of energy shot through my whole body. My back arched upwards. I felt wave after wave of euphoria come over me as he connected our bodies together as one. The world fell away. My pain and sorrow fell away. Existence as I knew it fell away. Our bodies bound together in pleasure was the only reality for me now. It had been so long, I had forgotten what it was like to feel that connectedness of two bodies now one, both lost in ecstasy. He lifted himself off of his side and onto his knees in front of me. I turned completely onto my back and faced him for the first time since I got into the bed. I looked up into those gray-green eyes to see him lost in the pleasure he was receiving from me. I remember how happy this made me feel, happy that I was pleasing him. I had been so afraid I wouldn't remember what to do or how to move, so afraid to disappoint him. Thankfully, my fears were unfounded. Our bodies moved in perfect rhythm as waves of ecstasy shot through me like an electrical current. I felt it go everywhere, from the tips of my fingers to the tips of my toes, everywhere. I lifted up my arms and reached towards him. The movement caused him to come back to momentary reality. Without breaking our connection, I lifted my head, and as my lips came to his, he stopped them just before they touched, his lips hovering just out of reach of mine. I reached my hands up and grabbed a full head of hair in each hand and pulled his lips to me. Our tongues swirled around each other in a dance as we pressed our mouths together, tighter and tighter. I suddenly realized I couldn't breathe. I started to pull away, but he held my mouth tight in his. As I struggled for air, I became lightheaded. A new euphoria came over me as a white light filled my eyes. Just as I thought I would pass out, he released our lips and leaned back once again on his knees in front of me. We both coughed and gasped for air, our bodies still intertwined. Still gasping for air, I sat up and wrapped my arms around his neck. I whispered in his ear, "It's all right, you can let it go, you can let it all out." As if I had given him permission, he arched back even further and let out a low, guttural grunt that I felt in my bones. Over and over, his essence went into the depths of me. It was over, or at least I thought it was. Suddenly, a shockwave of ecstasy and pleasure surprised me so completely that my whole body began to shudder. The waves rolled through me, one after another. All I knew at that moment was completeness, wholeness, nothingness. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. I opened my eyes to find Durrell's head on my chest, our bodies heaving in rhythm, trying to calm our hearts and catch our breath. In that moment of release and relief, safe and at peace in Durrell's arms, my soul and body spent both physically and emotionally. All my fear, anxiety, and tension expelled from my body in an exorcism of passion. I was suddenly aware that my husband was gone. I had lived every day for most of my adult life with the knowledge of his presence in the world. Now that was gone, as he was gone. I started to cry again. Tears of happiness mixed with tears of sorrow. Tears of ecstasy mixed with tears of pain. Tears of completeness mixed with tears of loss. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember feeling Durrell's arms around me in the night. I just remember waking up as thin rays of Florida sun broke through the curtain of the sliding glass doors that opened to the balcony of the room. The moment I opened my eyes, I felt light. My body was sore from all the weeping and lovemaking, yet I felt rested. It was at this moment the gentle rising and falling of Durrell's chest against my back. His warm breath on the back of my neck made it all come rushing back to me. The cruise, my husband's sickness, the diagnosis at the hospital in the Caymans, the flight to Fort Lauderdale, the days and nights in the hospital, the sight of Durrell walking around the corner of the hotel, the intensity of our night together, and the realization once again that my husband was gone. He had passed in the night, and now both of us were resting in peace. I put my hand on Durrell's arm and used it to pull myself closer to him, to feel his body against mine. As I did, he lifted his head and kissed my neck 3 times. "Good morning," he whispered. "Is he gone?" "Yes." "I'm so sorry, Sarah. Are you okay?" "Yes, thanks to you." "Anything I can do?" "You've already done more than I could have ever hoped anyone would do." Instead of saying anything more, he pulled me closer and held me so tight I thought I would burst. Then, without warning, he let go, threw the covers off of us, and lifted me up to sitting position. "Come on, let's take a shower and get you ready for the long day ahead of you." I didn't want to leave the bed, I didn't want to leave the room, I didn't want to leave him. I wanted to stay here and drown myself in him for the next few days. But I knew he was right. I would never forget this night. I would be forever grateful to him, forever bound to him, but I had to get up, get ready, and take my husband home. He got out of bed and stood in front of me, extending both hands towards me. I smiled as I reached out and took his hands. He slowly took a step backwards and gently pulled me up off of the bed. He walked backwards towards the bathroom, never taking his eyes off of mine. As we got close to the bathroom door, he turned, adjusting his arms backwards, never letting go of my hands. Now I saw his naked body from behind. My eyes traveled from his wide shoulders, down the V-shape of his back to his toned, muscled butt. Each cheek rose up and fell down as he walked. I was mesmerized by my beautiful stranger once again. As we got to the bathroom door, he turned back around to face me and led me backwards to the shower. He slid the shower door back and turned on the water. I placed my hands on his chest and pushed him away from me. A look of confusion came on his face, but I just smiled and gently pushed him backwards and turned him into the shower stall. I had one more way to thank him for last night. I walked into the shower behind him and turned him so that the spray of water was on his back, shielding me as I took the small bottle of shower gel and started washing him. I'll never know how much he enjoyed our love-making the night before, or if he even enjoyed it at all. I never considered myself someone who was particularly good at it, but I knew there was one thing I was good at: giving the man I loved a bath. After we stopped being intimate together, it was the only way I could pleasure my husband for many years. As my hands found their way to sensitive parts of him, he took in a quick breath, and I felt his whole body tense at the sudden burst of pleasure. As my hands traveled down the front of him, all the muscles in his body clenched tight. He fell backwards and his back crashed against the wall of the shower just under the shower head. The spray of water cascaded down the front of him and hit me in the face. I let out a faux scream, and we both laughed and laughed. It felt good to laugh on that day of all days. We stood there as the spray of water fell over us like a waterfall, laughing like little kids. He took me in his arms and turned us as one, until I was now under the water. He reached over and took the hotel shower gel, squeezed it into his hand, and began washing me as I had washed him. "Who are you?" I thought to myself. "How did I get so lucky to have you as my rideshare driver last night?" We barely said a word after we got out of the shower. In one last gesture of love and care, he grabbed a towel from the shelf and slowly, gently, and lovingly dried my whole body, even the bottoms of my feet. We both eventually found our clothes and silently dressed in front of each other. He walked over to the living room area, sat down on the sofa, and began putting his shoes on. I realized in just a few moments he would be gone and I would probably never see him again. The fear that I was suddenly alone in the world, without a man in my life, came over me like a shadow. As I stood there watching him, grappling with this new fear, he looked up, studied my face, stood up off the couch, and walked towards me. Hey, you're going to be okay. Go get your husband and take him home. Everything else will become clear after." He kissed me on the forehead, then turned and walked towards the door. "Durrell, wait." I walked over to the coffee table by the sofa, picked up my purse, and took 3 $100 bills out of my wallet. No, Sarah, no, don't cheapen what happened between us last night like this. Please, Durrell, please let me give you this. I took you away from a night of driving and earning money. I took your time and your love for a night. It's not much, but at least let me give you something." He stood still, staring at me in disbelief. I walked towards him, grabbed his arm, put the money in his hand, and closed his fist around it. "I can never repay you for what you did for me last night. At least I can have the peace of knowing that I was able to give you what you would have earned if you had said no to me, and worked all night instead. He opened his hand and looked down at the money. I saw a reluctant acceptance come across his face. He closed his hand around the money, turned his back to me, opened the door, and walked out of my life almost the same way he walked into it. I never saw him again, but every moment of that night is etched in my memory and will be to my dying day. I've been back to Fort Lauderdale a few times since that night and always use his rideshare company to get around. For a while, I hope to see his name and picture come onto my phone as my driver, but it never has. I have come to accept that it never will. I've learned not to look for him in hopes of reliving that night. The one man in the world that I needed on the darkest and most difficult night of my life was provided to me. I understand now how rare that is in this life. He will always be my rideshare lover, my beautiful stranger.